Hola Flamingos, this is my third shot recording this video because I keep touching my trackpad with my hand, and now I've moved the cursor well away from the stop button, so I don't think we're going to have this problem again. So welcome to my mid-month update that I'm going to be doing every the middle of the month, just to kind of give you a little flavor of my own stuff and what's been going on in my own publishing world and writing and all that stuff. First thing I want to mention, I'm participating in the Writers for Ukraine challenge. It's basically people are donating money and you go and then writing, like indie authors are getting together to do that. I got about 10,000 words written. We're almost at the end of the 7 days. It's 7 days long. You can go to activatedauthors.com to check it out. There's over 1 million, I think it's 1.5 million or close on words. I didn't get any words in this morning. I woke up late. This bloody, what's it called? Daylight savings time. It's great in the evenings, but it's hard to make that shift. The second thing I wanted to mention is my review. So I've been posting my reviews of books on Reddit, Goodreads, and my website. And if you want to check those out, you're more than welcome to. I'll put some links in my newsletter, which you can. You're probably listening to this. You're probably on my newsletter, and if not, you can go to andrewmarkrowe.com/mailing-list and put your email and first name in there and get on there. Just in terms of reviews, I mean, this is something that I think that I don't know if it's either not appreciated or like I know personally, like I've read and consumed all kinds of things and haven't even left reviews. That's been my thing most of my adult life. And then when I started doing this indie author thing, I kind of realized how much it impacts people's livelihoods. I'm lucky enough to be able to do this as like a side gig hobby thing that maybe one day it will be a stable income generating thing, but I'm basically treating it like one of the boys who gets a quad or a snowmobile or something like that as their spends money on their disposable income on other stuff. This is kind of it, even though I'm trying to treat it as a business as best I can, trying to make it profitable, but there's certain things that I do with it that I know if I really wanted to make this into a strictly money-making venture, I wouldn't do as weirdly experimental stuff that I do. I remember, like, the one book I wanted to mention was this book, The Wane of the Heart, and so it's one of my relatively recent. It was released October 2021, and I had an author write a foreword for me, Raymond St. Elmo, who's like the Dickens of modern fantasy as far as I'm concerned. His writing is incredible, criminally underrated. Well, he's not underrated. He gets great reviews, but I think this guy should be spoken about and more. It's more literary fiction as far as I can tell. And he said to me, when after he read it, and he was positive about it, and he was like, "This is great, but good for you for having the courage to do this, because it's there's a lot of like vulgarity and crude humor to go with weirdly like philosophical stuff, like the kind of things you'd find in like a Herman Hesse or Paulo Coelho book, which it's like a very my editor says to me, or I asked him, because I'm trying to figure out how to market my books. And he said, I said, "What do you think this is? What genre?" He said, "Well, this is an Andrew Mark Rowe. There's nothing really else I know that it's like that." And, part of my ego appreciates the fact that it's like, oh, I'm this unique snowflake. But the fact of the matter is like in like most marketing people will tell you this, like, if you want to make money at this, you got to write the genre and, write to people's expectations and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know, for my personal experience with literature, it's been the stuff that's really been off the beaten path. It's really spoken to me. And, like this, my newest series of novels, The Body Bird, is largely a picaresque type, which I picked that type of style up from reading a lot of Irvin Welsh. And picaresque is like rogue novels, which are, picaro is a Spanish term for a rogue, and the basic idea is that it's like this like ne'er-do-well. There's a book I want to pick up. It's called no, the name escapes me now. I got it on some dude talked about it on Reddit. But one of my favorite fantasy series was Mark Lawrence's take on this fellow, and it's called the Mark Lawrence's series is called Mark Lawrence's, or the Red Queen's War. First book is called Prince of Fools, and the main character is kind of a bit of an anti-hero rogue type, and that's more of that whole Red Queen's War is more of a traditionally structured fantasy story. But like a lot of those stories, like there's no like the guy is like at the end of the story, he doesn't like grow a whole bunch. In my book, The Body Bird, like there is some character development in the first book anyways. But largely it's like these series of adventures that are seemingly unconnected throughout, and then there's like some sort of like an event that's like brings them together to some degree. But a lot of these stories, like there is no connecting event, and there's just like these almost like a series of like short stories about these like, I don't know, small misadventures or something. It's like very like kind of low stakes, like a lot more about like joking and dialogue. Like I think some of the Tarantino movies, at least in terms of like the dialogue, draw heavily from the Picaro type of thing. I mean, the characters that he gets on with are like largely anti-heroic to some degree. And I don't know if you saw The Hateful Eight, but that was like they're all POS people essentially. they're all like not very nice people, except for I think the driver. And so that's kind of like something that really makes me happy to write and talk about, and like and this is one of my philosophical decisions that I've made about like I don't like one of the things that Stephen King said about writing, when somebody asked him like why do you write such horrific novels, he said, what makes you think I have a choice? And I think there's some degree of that there. Like I don't know that I don't know that I could write anything besides what I do write. Like the muse isn't at my beck and call. I'm at the muse's beck and call is one way of putting it into a metaphor. It's hard to talk about that. Like the creative process can't be really put on a platter and given to somebody, no matter how much you want to break things down. I think that's kind of you can make you can slap together a skeleton, put on some meat and bones and all that kind of stuff. But just at some level, you can't be a necromancer. You gotta have a living thing that's born and created that way. But anyways, that's just my own opinion about it. So the reviews I've read of books I've read this month, and a lot of these are audiobook because I listen to audiobooks while I'm getting my steps in, trying to stay healthy, which goes well until you eat a couple bowls of ice cream after supper. Not that happened last night. So the first one is Fluke. Fluke was written by Christopher Moore, and it's one of the most messed up. Like Christopher Moore is one of my favorite authors, and his book, Fool, was one of the my main influences. Like reading that book was like gave me license to continue with this like absolutely puerile, juvenile, ridiculous body stuff that I've kind of taken up, because those are the kinds of like comedies that I've always enjoyed from like a film perspective. And that's something my editor said to me. He said, look, if you had this in a different medium, if you had this in like television or film, like it would be a different story altogether. But it's not really something that you see a lot of in literature. And so, but anyway, but Fluke is not totally like that. There's a few like dick jokes and all that kind of stuff. Like it's pretty funny, but it's a little more subdued than the in-your-face stuff like Fool. But it's so bizarre and hilariously bizarre. It's like it starts off with like it's like a mystery. You don't know where it's gonna go, and then there's like a marine biologist sees the words "bite me" written on the tail of a whale, and anyways, he's got to go to. He's like thinks he's going crazy at first, and then there's like a break-in in his office, and like just like these mysteries start piling up, and it all starts to, and it gets bizarre. Highly recommended. The second one is The Molting of a Queen, which was a novella written by Peter Foote, who is a member of Genre Writers of Atlantic Canada, which is a closed Facebook group I'm in. And he's a gem of a human being, and he's going to be my next guest on the podcast. And I read Molting of the Queen. I was thoroughly impressed with it. It's clear he's got a lot of chops as a writer. He's done this. It's clear that he knows the craft pretty well, and he knows how to execute a story. There's like emotional components in it. Like there's a little bit of a flip in terms of what you're expecting, like with a big bad, or and it's like a really nice, heartwarming type of story. And most of the conflict is internal and somebody coming to terms with themselves, and those are the kinds of things I really enjoy. And like most of my stories, there's not much violence or that kind of stuff. Like, well, there might be some set piece violence, but people don't win by killing usually, and that was what Peter put in Molting of a Queen, or that's kind of like a theme he riffed on. I highly recommend it. Left-Handed Darkness, which was a Ursula K. Le Guin book, which had the preface to that book. It's probably the best description of the artistic process that I've ever read, or at least the writing artistic process, because you can't really put it into words what it is we do when we write. I think if you can name it, it's like the Tao. If you can name it, it's not the thing that you can name, And she says that, because it's very paradoxical, she says that we point to a pack of lies and say that that's the truth as authors. And her book is ostensibly about an alien who goes to, well, he's a human being, but he lands on a planet where all the humans are androgynous, and they go through a period of heat every month where they basically can be either a man or a woman, and and procreate that way. But there's like, they still have their problems. Their problems are a bit different than ours, but it's really like gets into like conversations about the nature of reality and the nature of God and being, and it's deeply philosophical and masterfully done. Like, really impressed with it. The Worth of Gold, which was the second book in Christopher Walsh's The Worth of Gold, or Gold and Steel series. So that's number 2. I read the first one, As Fierce as Steel, and reviewed that back in 2020. This one's another great one. It's a big, massive tome of a book, and it's largely political. There's no magic. It's fantasy, but there's no magic. It's kind of like, they got like some electricity and other kinds of stuff like that. But the book's great. There's a really interesting discussion of wrestling. I understand Christopher Walsh was because I've spoken to him before, and I've seen him at book fairs and stuff, and he used to be in wrestling, and like at the local Newfoundland wrestling scene, and this was before he started writing full time as like his hobby. And anyways, you can really tell there's some of that in there. I appreciated that as being child of the 90s and watching some WWF or WWE after school sometimes, and playing the games on the Nintendo 64. The last one I read in March is The Dragon Reborn, which is book 3 in the Wheel of Time series. Now, I've listened to the first 3, and I feel like those 3, like, you don't really get a full feel of what the whole thing is about until you've listened to the third one, because there's a couple things that, I wasn't sure about with the direction Robert Jordan was going with the first 2 books, but by the third one I was kind of like, okay, he's thought this through, and I mean, that's kind of like his whole thing. Like, the guy, like, like, they call him the American Tolkien, and I can see that because he's like very scholarly and deliberate, and like, it's a very I don't feel like this guy is a guy who rushes anything, which is, that's his own juju, and it's great. I really enjoy it. Like, I couldn't write this book. I couldn't write any of those books. And I know that, that's just, it's a different way of doing this stuff. But he gets into like very interesting philosophical discussions as well. There's a couple things that make me think the guy liked a little bit of LSD or some psychedelics, because there was like some very, some of the magic is very psychedelic in nature, and like getting into the whole, like, it's very Eastern philosophy laced, which is, I'm down with that. What else do I need to say? Okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of just this quick little update. If you've read The Weighing of the Heart and want to leave a review, I'd love that. If you want to review any of my books, there's no, can't really downplay the importance of it. I think, people have ideas about what book marketing is without actually having to go through the nitty gritty of what it is and spend countless hours and money and time on this thing, right? Like, they're largely part of the book marketing process, and they're in the hands of the reader. And you have the power to do great. You have the power to be greatly creative and greatly destructive as a reviewer. And that's kind of as far as I'll go with that. Like, I don't think, people have the right to do whatever they want to do. But, just, I would say, keep in mind that there are people's livelihood are affected when you do this kind of stuff, especially now. This isn't like, with independent publishing, this isn't, there's no book tours where people go around and get flown around by publishers, even with big publishers anymore. Like, and big publishers have like marketing dollars, and they have people who they have massive teams of editors too, who polish everything up to like a perfect sheen. And independent authors have fewer resources. It doesn't mean you can't write a really good independently published book. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. But the reality is that, when you've got like 20, 30 reviews on a book or less, what each of those reviews says does matter. And just keep that in mind. John Dobbin wrote a piece where he quoted Joe Hill, who's a horror author in his own right, but is, people know him as Stephen King's son, who he wrote some great books, Horns, Nosferatu, the one that's like a license plate. That's they made a series on Shudder, which is really good. But anyways, he talked about it. He said nobody looks at a 3-star review and say, "Whoa, that's probably pretty good." And they think, "What a piece of shit! I'm not wasting my time or money on it." It's the reality of the thing. Unless it's at least a 4-star. Like, there's even promotional sites that won't even let you promote the book. I'm not saying to like pump up garbage, but I think a lot of I think a lot of criticism is somebody saying, well, if I had done it, I would have done it this way. Which is not like, that's more of, to take that position. I think you might be in a, position of an educator, a teacher, that kind of thing. But I think that when it comes to appreciation of art, that's kind of like it, right? Like, you wouldn't go to a forest and say that tree's a piece of junk because it's bent and gnarled, whereas this one's a big tall oak. Usually you just say, oh, it's a nice forest, and you appreciate things for what they are, which is what I try to do with my reviews. Unless it's a absolute clunker, I won't even rate it and don't talk about it. But if it's a good book and it feels like it does what it sets out to do, and there's nothing like glaringly bad about it, I'll give it a 5-star. But you do you. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll be back on the 1st of April with an interview with Peter Foote. Thanks. Bye.